A reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, beginning at the 15th verse. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle Jesus in his words. And they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard it, they marvelled, and they left him and went away. Life under Roman occupation was something of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you had the protection of the Roman Empire. There were soldiers who were marching around, and you could see their presence, and they kept the peace to some extent, this famous Pax Romana. There were the Roman roads. You could travel quite easily around, and if you were trading goods, well, that was quite a good thing to do. If you were travelling by yourself, just wait for a passing party of Roman troops and wander with them, and you would be quite safe. This is all quite good, and the Romans themselves were fairly tolerant. They allowed you to carry on speaking your own language, which is why in the eastern half of the Roman Empire they spoke Greek, and in the western half of the Roman Empire they spoke Latin. They allowed you to continue your practices of worship. So if you had your own particular local god, well, you could still pray to that particular local god, and the Romans may even add him into the great pantheon of gods. The Jews could carry on worshipping their God and our God. So this was all okay to some extent. You still didn't rule your own lands. You were still reminded very often you were under foreign occupation, and of course taxation was something which really, rubbed it in every time you used a Roman coin. It had on it stamped the head of Caesar, Tiberius at the time, and that would have been something of an issue because, that's a graven image. And the Ten Commandments have something to say about a graven image. And then the inscription, let me read it to you. It read, "Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus." Augustus. So, Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine? Well, this is surely blasphemy to Jewish ears. And it was a perpetual reminder that they were not only under foreign occupation, but under Gentile, pagan foreign occupation. These things were not popular. The Pharisees particularly bristled against it. The Herodians, maybe not quite so much, because at least Herodias, the king, was a puppet Roman king, so they had some way into the power of the Romans that way. And so it is that this rather unlikely combination of the Pharisees and the Herodians come together to try to trap Jesus. And they use this Roman coinage to do that. And this idea of taxation, which is so unpopular, that's the point of this particular thrust. This is the issue which they're hoping to catch Jesus out with. They ask him, and I'll get the wording right, "Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Jesus knew it was a trap, and so he didn't answer the question. Because he knew that if he said, yes, of course it's lawful, all the Jewish patriots around would be outraged. If he said, no, of course it's not lawful, all the Roman authorities would be outraged. The Pharisees and the Herodians were there just waiting to see the answer that would be given. And so he asks his own question. He says to them, "Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. They brought a denarius into the temple. Well, that's not very good, is it? Normally you would change up a denarius into the temple coinage, a shekel, so that it didn't have the graven image of this emperor upon it, this person claiming to be the son of a god. But they brought one in. And Jesus gave this interesting answer. He asked them first, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said, Caesar's. And then he said, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. So you can see the logic here. The coin is stamped with an image of Caesar, so you should render it, literally give back. You should render it to Caesar. He has a prior claim on that coinage because it's stamped with his image. He produced the coinage. Therefore, you're returning to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and you return to God that which is God's. But God doesn't have any coinage. What does he mean there? Well, there is something which is stamped with the image of God. Let me read to you from Genesis 1:26 to 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. So we're to give back to God that which bears his image, which is a challenge, because that's us. We can render coinage to Caesar because it bears his image, but we're render to God our very selves because we bear his image. It's not surprising, as we read, when they heard it, they marvelled, and they left him and went away. This is controversial teaching in a very secular world. It was controversial teaching in the wider Roman Empire. For the Jews, yes, they understood that they were the people of God, so they would render service to God. That was fine. But as Christianity spread throughout the wider Roman Empire, well, that cost many Christians their very lives. And as we live in an increasingly secular world around us, as we render to God that which is God's, our very selves, as we seek to serve God, to live according to his commands, to trust him entirely with our salvation and our understanding of the world, well, that is rather countercultural as well. Britain is too polite to kill people for their faith, but we may find ourselves somewhat shunned instead. Rendering ourselves to God means keeping the knowledge of God and serving him and living out his commands. It's a high calling because, yes, it is costly. It means that we are rendering our very selves to God, but we do so because we know we bear his very image. What a thought that is, and what a great motive that is, that we should therefore pay our dues to the God whose image we bear.